The badge stopped working at exactly 6:02 in the morning on a Thursday. Not a minute before, not a minute after. She stood there in front of the data center's main access door, coffee in one hand, ID in the other, the little green LED blinking red like it was laughing. Camille didn't curse or huff. She just stared at it, stone still, as if daring it to blink again. It did, once, twice, then went dead. She didn't try again because Camille already knew. Most people thought of her as the badge lady, as if she handed out lanyards and programmed door buzzers with a chisel and prayer. 18 years inside this corporate monolith, buried in a basement humming with servers and stale coffee, had made her something else entirely. She had keys, real and digital, that no one else even remembered existed. If you peeled back the drywall in the security wing, you'd probably find her name etched behind the pipes. She was the access system, not because it said so on a flowchart, but because somewhere between patch updates and failed penetration tests, the system had quietly started depending on her. No one noticed until Darren showed up. Darren came in like a podcast ad, glossy, loud, full of startup lingo, and smelling like expensive failure. Fresh from Stanford or Wharton or some other overpriced factory that churned out MBA Terminators, he called himself an optimizer, whatever that meant. He used the phrase digital synergy in front of Camille. She stared at him so long he actually asked if she was okay. She was fine. He just wasn't worth blinking for. The jokes started around week 2. Little barbs were tossed around open office pods by 20-something contractors who thought legacy system meant a boomer with a pension. Someone left a sticky note on Camille's desk once. Does the ghost in the shell need coffee? Ha. Shar called it a morale-building prank. Camille didn't even remove it, she just filed it digitally. She filed everything. Then came the closed-door meetings. She knew every inch of that building, and she knew exactly where to stand to hear Darren say things like, "We can cut 2 heads in access control if we port to Flex Shield." Honestly, Camille had 1 foot in retirement anyway. 1 foot, huh? Why was she still the one logging 3 in the morning badge anomalies that saved them from a 4-tact breach last quarter? Still, she said nothing. She just sat quietly in her cage of patch cables and ID laminators, listening to her hours get trimmed and her name vanish from project logs. She was officially non-core. Then her badge died. Not because of an error, not because of some fluke, but because Darren ordered it. She found the audit trail 2 days before, hidden under a flurry of approvals from new hires who couldn't code their way out of a JSON loop. A change order tagged as deactivation, Asset Legacy 113, her ID, signed by some third-party schmuck out of Georgia. She hadn't even been fired, just phased out. So when that little light blinked red, she didn't call HR or storm into Darren's glass office demanding explanations. She got in her car, turned the ignition, drove home, and waited. Darren called it modernization, said it with the smugness of a man who'd never soldered a board or traced an intermittent fault at 2 in the morning under fluorescent lights that hummed like tinnitus. Camille had seen buzzwords come and go, but this time was different. This time, the budget cuts came with press releases and a software suite from some vendor with a cool logo and a pitch deck full of diagrams that made 0 sense to anyone who'd actually seen a badge reader choke on a corrupted sink. Flex Shield, they called it. All cloud-based, zero-trust, AI-monitored, blockchain-hypnotized nonsense. Darren paraded it around like a trophy wife, nodding along while sales reps used phrases like proactive compliance architecture and autonomous threat response. Camille had seen the back end. The system didn't even handle daylight saving time without breaking half the timestamp logic. Still, no one asked her. Her days got quieter, too quiet. Systems she once maintained started slipping away, moved to pilot projects and transitional environments. Her ticket load didn't shrink, it vanished. 1 week she had 38 open issues. The next week, 3, all assigned to new tech contractors, kids from companies Darren claimed were nimble and cost-aligned. Camille called them what they were, disposable. Then they came for Jerry. Jerry was the kind of guy who called every laptop a unit and still labeled his flash drives with masking tape. He'd been with Camille since before the last reorg, back when the badge system still ran on a Frankenstein sequel box she kept alive with spit and daily prayers. Darren let him go with a cheery email thanking him for his years of dedication and a reminder to turn in his badge. A week later, Alina was gone too. She was restructured, the word of the month, like she was drywall. Camille didn't cry or fight. She just came in every day and documented quietly, thoroughly, like she always did. Then one morning she went to scan into Sector 2, her sector, and the door didn't open. Beep, red light. She tried again. Beep, red. She stood still, just like before, blinking once, twice, slow as a snake about to strike. Try again, the guard offered. A kid who probably thought SCSI was an anime character. She didn't. She turned and walked to HR. The office smelled like peppermint lotion and fake plants. Dana, the HR lead, looked up like Camille was interrupting a TikTok break. My badge failed, Camille said. Dana blinked, like she was trying to remember who Camille was. Oh, you'll have to talk to Darren. No apology, no explanation, no mention of the fact that Camille still had an active contract, no termination notice, no offboarding steps. Just talk to Darren. Camille didn't talk to Darren. She walked out slowly. No dramatic pauses, no door slamming, no you'll regret this. She didn't leave a resignation note or take her framed photo of the old crew from the 2009 upgrade project. She didn't even log out of her terminal, she just left. When she got home, she didn't pour wine or rage on Facebook. She pulled out her old ThinkPad, opened a shell, and started watching. Because if Darren thought disabling her badge meant she was gone, he was about to learn the difference between access and control. The first badge failure hit Tuesday morning at 9:17. A clean-cut, Sector 4 refused entry to 3 contractors trying to access a cooling cluster. The badge reader blinked red, then blinked nothing. They thought it was a power blip. A reset fixed it for exactly 6 minutes. Then Sector 7 died. Then the freight access door wouldn't open for the hardware delivery team, who waited in the parking lot for 2 hours before someone noticed they were still there. Darren chalked it up to integration friction and blamed the new cloud sync protocols. His voice got tighter in meetings, though he still clung to that MBA cadence, tossing around words like latency differential and infrastructure maturity. By Thursday, 5 badge readers were down. The Flex Shield dashboard kept pinging with false positives and unknown device IDs. The new hires didn't know what they were looking at, so they rebooted again and again. One of them reset a whole segment of access nodes without checking failover dependencies, taking out authentication for half the biometric scanners on the East Wing. A vendor got stuck in the sub-stairwell for 26 minutes. The emergency latch had rusted shut. No one had tested it since Camille left. Through it all, Darren kept smiling. It's just a transition period, he told the board liaison. Camille's system had undocumented quirks. We're aligning it to spec. Quirks. That's what he called the hand-tuned bash scripts she built over years to keep ghost devices from pinging access logs into a tailspin. That's what he called the layered protocol she designed to catch spoofed badge attempts from external networks. He didn't understand the system, but it understood him. Every automated audit, every timeout ping, every delayed sync, Camille had quietly tagged in log files across a decade of patchwork IT evolution. They were still there, still running, just unmonitored now, and slowly they began to decay. One junior sysadmin, Aaron, a nervous wreck with energy drink stains on his hoodie, finally messaged her on LinkedIn. Hey Camille, sorry to bug you, but did you ever patch that Tier 3 script loop that used to trigger when badge node B 2.44 goes to sync? Think it's back? The logs are going crazy. No reply. Camille read it, of course. She even hovered her cursor over the reply box, but she didn't type. Instead, she opened her local terminal and watched as 5 systems simultaneously tripped the flag for unknown dependency timeout. She sipped her coffee and clicked refresh. 3 more. She leaned back and cracked her neck. The system wasn't crashing, it was unraveling, and she hadn't touched a single thing. It happened at 4:07 in the morning, like a stroke, sudden, irreversible, and eerily quiet. At first, the security feed, normally a chessboard of blinking green, froze mid-cycle, then turned a full grid of red. Every single badge reader went offline, from the executive floor to the loading dock, from the biometric checkpoint near the thermal cluster to the ancient freight elevator that still groaned like it hated its own purpose. Dead. The first guy to find out was the janitor, who couldn't get into the lobby closet to refill paper towels. He called building services, who thought he'd misdialed them. By the time the first shift arrived, the parking lot looked like a Best Buy on Black Friday. Engineers, contractors, and admin staff crowding around doors that wouldn't open. Panic didn't start with a scream. It started with a Slack ping. Anyone else locked out? Followed by another, guys, my badge isn't working and I've got to reboot Node Group Delta before the update script pushes. Then none of the backups are triggering. At 4:13 in the morning, the access control server began logging 10,000-plus access denial pings per minute. The log file ballooned to 4 gigabytes in 12 minutes. The system couldn't rotate the logs fast enough, they started overwriting themselves. Then the scripts began to loop. Autonomous badge sync scripts Camille had written years ago, never properly integrated into Flex Shield, began calling deprecated authentication paths. Those paths no longer existed. Each call failed, then retried again. No failover, just infinite recursion. The CPU on the badge server spiked to 99% and stayed there. At 4:19 in the morning, internal diagnostics for the physical security layer flagged an incomplete dependency tree. That was Camille's design, a protection mechanism, a digital dead man's switch. Nobody else knew it existed. The backup authentication systems, biometric code pad, and NFC relay were tied to a cascading initialization chain that relied on Camille's private credential hash to finalize boot, which no one had because Darren had deleted her user profile. Brilliant move. Emergency access codes were worthless. They depended on the same verification loop. The IT contractors began texting Darren directly. He didn't answer at first. Then he tried rebooting the badge servers remotely from his tablet. Nothing responded. The subnet was loop storming, requests pinging in infinite failure and choking the switches. The building itself was sealed. Even the fire doors couldn't be triggered manually without violating OSHA regulations that the company had spent 6 months navigating for their last compliance check. Inside the building, the few employees who had slept over for the late shift were trapped. They huddled in the vending machine lounge, trying not to panic. A junior tech tried calling the vendor who sold them Flex Shield. They were asleep in Dubai. And Camille? She was on her porch, wrapped in a fleece blanket, watching the sunrise like it was a movie premiere. Her ThinkPad sat open beside her, battery full, CPU idle, logs scrolling silently like prayer beads. Not a finger lifted, not a command sent. She just let go. The system had always depended on her. Now it was proving it. At 6:12 in the morning, the first server rack breached thermal tolerance, not because of a power surge, not even from overuse, but because the airflow automation that regulated cooling protocols was tied to internal zoning zones that now read as inaccessible due to badge system failure. When the cooling daemon couldn't verify physical access compliance for the emergency vent override, it defaulted to safe mode, which meant it did nothing. Server room 3 reached 103 degrees Fahrenheit in 8 minutes. By 6:30, the temperature in rack cluster delta crossed 109 degrees Fahrenheit. Blade servers began shutting down to protect themselves. Remote management tools timed out. Monitoring dashboards grayed out. The Flex Shield AI flagged it as a suspicious hardware event. Darren was asleep on his ergonomic nightmare of a mattress when his phone began vibrating like a possessed jackhammer. By the time he answered, the COO was already 3 layers deep into a profanity spiral, demanding a full incident report. Words like client breach and legal exposure started surfacing like sharks around blood. By 7:02 in the morning, 2 enterprise clients filed SLA violations. One had just lost access to their medical records cache. Another's cloud instance failed to sync overnight backups for 4,000 users. The financial penalties alone would be 6 figures per hour. Still, no one could get inside the building. Someone suggested breaking a window. Legal shut that down over liability issues, not to mention the fact that some of the windows were triple-tempered, security glass rated to withstand small arms fire. The VP of infrastructure called in a physical locksmith, who laughed until he realized they weren't joking, then quoted $7,000 in a 4-hour arrival window. Darren agreed. It didn't matter. He needed something, anything that looked like progress. At 7:24 in the morning, a system administrator in Iowa realized something was deeply wrong when even the off-site backup relay failed to initiate. The data center's heartbeat, its pulse check script, wasn't running because it required a physical key confirmation Camille had built in after a near-loss event 5 years ago. Her idea, never documented, too obscure, Darren had said. By 8:11 in the morning, Darren was on an emergency board call, trying to explain why an entire Tier 3 data center, supposedly rated for 99.9999% uptime, was flatlined on a Monday morning with no cyber attack, no natural disaster, and no employee sabotage. Except sabotage didn't have to look like a crowbar. Sometimes it looked like absence. Sometimes it looked like a woman you forgot to invite to the vendor onboarding meeting because she wasn't strategic. Camille sat in her kitchen, one leg tucked under the other, sipping gas station tea and watching the news. Her cat slept beside her, dead to the world, just like the badge server in rack E14. Local station B-roll showed concerned employees outside a glass monolith. No one talked to reporters. No names, just a two-line caption. Major tech firm suffers unexplained data center failure. Cause under investigation. Camille smiled, not because she was vindicated, but because, for once, they didn't know who to blame. That was justice in its purest form. By 9 in the morning, Darren's forehead glistened like a pork chop in a sauna. His tie was gone. His voice, normally TED Talk smooth, now cracked like old vinyl. He had tried everything. The Flex Shield vendor looped him through 3 departments before casually informing him that physical access failures fell outside their cloud SLA. Local hardware is your responsibility, they chirped from a call center in Estonia. He slammed the phone down so hard the case cracked. By 10:15, he'd flown in a forensic IT firm with a name that sounded like a Bond villain's hedge fund. They charged $1,800 an hour and wore blazers like body armor. After scanning the network for an hour, their lead consultant, some guy named Trey with a Bluetooth earpiece and an allergy to humility, said, "Looks like someone designed the dependencies to eat themselves." Darren blinked. "Does that mean?" "It means your system's cannibalizing itself, and we don't have root access to stop it. Who built this?" Darren swallowed hard. At 11:03, he called Camille's old desk phone. The line rang 7 times, then a voicemail. "You've reached Camille. If this is a badge-related emergency, it's probably already too late." He stared at the receiver like it had insulted his mother. By noon, he was pacing the stairwell, tie gone, hair wild, whispering into his phone between emails and Slack pings. HR wouldn't take responsibility. Legal was now involved. Facilities had threatened to walk. The CIO sent him a single-line message. "You told me Flex Shield had us covered." Finally, at 12:40 to 1 in the afternoon, Darren opened his Gmail tab and typed, "Subject, urgent, need assistance, to Camille-H@tonmail.com. Body, Camille, I believe we are facing significant access control failures. I would like to request your assistance in resolving this matter. Please respond at your earliest convenience." He waited 1 hour. 2, nothing. Then, at 4:22 in the afternoon, a single reply arrived. "My consulting rate is $400 per hour. Prepaid, no refunds. Camille." No explanation, no warm greeting, just a rate like she was quoting him for snake removal. Darren didn't hesitate. He wired $4,000 immediately. She responded 5 minutes later with a private session link. When the call connected, Camille appeared on screen with a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest employee." She didn't smile or gloat. She just said, "Open the override port on node B 2.44. The fallback script's waiting for permission." Darren scrambled to obey. 10 minutes later, one zone lit back up, just one, Sector 2, the core diagnostics rack. He exhaled like a drowning man catching a straw. "Thank God," he muttered. "Can you do the rest now?" Camille stared at him flatly. "That wasn't the deal. But we still can't get into critical storage. Backup power's running out. Prepaid," she repeated. "And I only billed you for 1 hour." She disconnected. He tried calling back. Nothing. He tried emailing again. She replied 3 hours later, "Further assistance requires a new contract. Terms available upon request." Darren sat back in his chair, sweating bullets, while the building he swore he had optimized continued to choke on its own unacknowledged architecture. The building didn't need a hero. It needed its ghost back, and Camille wasn't haunting for free. At 7:12 in the morning the next day, Darren's inbox lit up like a fuse. Subject line, "Restoration proposal terms attached." The email body was just one line. "If you want the building breathing again, read the PDF." He opened it, half expecting a ransom note written in crayon. Instead, he found a clean, surgically worded contract, 3 pages, legally ironclad. The title, Executive Consulting Agreement, Camille H. It opened with a blunt clause. Camille would be reinstated as Chief Access Security Architect, a role that did not previously exist but would now report directly to the board, bypassing Darren entirely. She would be granted full infrastructure veto power over all third-party vendors touching the access, authentication, or facility management stack, all of them, including Flex Shield. Oh, and retroactive hazard pay. Darren's pulse hit triple digits. He called legal. Legal said, "You don't have a leg to stand on, and also you're an idiot." He called the board. They were already on a video call. 10 gray-haired executives in 10 different angry time zones. The chairman's voice was gravel soaked in jet fuel. Can she fix it? Yes, Darren croaked. Then shut up and sign. The digital signatures processed before Camille even finished her breakfast. By 11:45 in the morning, she stood in front of the data center's main entrance again, same coffee in one hand, same deactivated badge in the other. Except this time, the door opened. 2 interns held it for her like she was royalty. She didn't rush or even blink at the badge readers, still blinking red across most zones like embarrassed children caught in a lie. Camille walked through the building like it was her church, straight to the old access terminal, one they'd tried to decommission 3 times but never successfully replaced. It booted up in 30 seconds. She plugged in her ThinkPad, opened 6 separate console windows, and began typing like she was pulling bones from a grave. In the first hour, she re-enabled the fallback loop authentication daemon. In the second, she untangled Darren's vendor spaghetti, deleting a Flex Shield module labeled Syncadino that had been sending recursive pings to an empty IP address in Luxembourg. Cooling came back online. Badge readers chirped awake. Biometric fallback confirmed authorization. By 1:46 in the afternoon, access logs stabilized. Server temperatures dropped. Staff filed back into the building like survivors after a siege. Camille didn't say a word. She just printed out a single sheet of paper, walked it down the hall, and slid it across Darren's desk. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Shirt wrinkled, eyes twitching, tie forgotten on a chair. She didn't wait for him to read it. She just said, "This is your training manual now," and glanced at the bold title printed in 16-point font. "Redundancy doesn't equal resilience." Camille turned and walked out, slow and steady, every click of her boots a lesson he'd never forget. Behind her, the building exhaled for the first time in 3 days, alive but different, because now it belonged to her. Camille's resignation wasn't an event. There was no announcement, no farewell cupcakes, no awkward cards signed by co-workers who never learned her last name. It arrived like everything else she did, precisely, without flourish, and fatal to the complacent. Her exit email came in at 7 in the morning sharp, time-stamped to the second. Subject line, "Final credential termination, C. Harper." No body text, just an attachment. The PDF inside was 147 pages. Title page, "How to Lose Your Infrastructure in 7 Days, a Post-Mortem Autopsy of Ignorance and Arrogance by Camille Harper Sissa." The report did not pull punches. It outlined, in brutal, dry prose, how every system in that building had relied not on modern protocols, but on trust, human context, and cross-wired legacy adaptations silently maintained by her. It cited time-stamped evidence of Darren's decisions, the deletion of her credential without backup, the blind deployment of Flex Shield without proper sandboxing, the removal of Tier 2 fallback daemons without validation, the refusal to onboard her into strategic planning despite 18 years of root-level access. She even included a screenshot of a Slack message where Darren joked that Camille probably still thinks punch cards are a thing. That slide made it into the viral version because, yes, Camille uploaded a redacted copy. She scrubbed company names and replaced logos with black bars, but the core was untouched. She posted it anonymously on a niche sysadmin forum under the username Badge47. It caught fire. Within 24 hours, the post was shared on R Sysadmin, Hacker News, LinkedIn, and 3 private Discord servers. Reddit called it the finest revenge omission since the printer spooler incident of 2016. LinkedIn users with job titles like infrastructure visionary tried to decode the identity of the company in question. Some guessed right, a few didn't care because the post was bigger than a company. It was a warning. By day 3, the firm's own clients were quoting Camille's report back to them. By day 5, Darren was removed from the Access Oversight Committee, ID changed, office relocated, no announcement, just gone. And Camille? She didn't even flinch. She was already consulting full-time, internationally. Her first client, a multinational that reached out after reading her report, asked a single question: "Can you teach us how not to screw this up from the start?" She didn't say yes. She sent her rate sheet. They paid in full. At home, her office looked different now. Brighter, airier. But one thing sat centered on the shelf, behind glass, her old badge, the one that blinked red, framed above a brass plate engraved with, "You should have asked what I do before deciding I didn't matter." The blinking light had long gone dead, but Camille, she was just getting started.